Hello. Today I'm going to tie for you what I'm just calling a jig streamer. So I've been talking about doing some tight line nymphing and I wanted to expand that capability and add some heavy streamer or streamers to my fly box. So I looked on the internet and this is what I came up with. I'm mimicking something, probably a mashup of what I've seen. I'm going to do this one in size 8, mostly because this is the size of brass dumbbell eyes that I have. They're rather large. I'm going to use this Ultra thread in 140. It's white and a little bit of that ecstasy yarn for kind of a thorax or belly. And I'm kind of tying from the scrap in here. That was a piece of craft fur that my wife was using to make Christmas decorations. And I snatched a little piece that was left over. So I've got that jig hook in the vise. And I'm going to tie in those dumbbell eyes. So, I mean, they're brass, not tungsten, but they're twice as big as most of the beads that I have. So I think they're going to really kind of pull things to the bottom here. And there are times, not at present, when the water's a little on the high side and you need some extra weight to get down there. There are also times where the water's kind of heavy and you want to drag a streamer or kind of drift a streamer um, past some of those larger trout, especially here in the fall when they're putting on the feed bag and preparing for winter. So again, this I was just looking to get something a little heavier and just to have that option. So I'm doing some cross wraps here around those eyes on the front of that 60-degree bend. So you can twist this around. You can turn it in both directions, right? So you saw it kind of slip side to side. I'm hoping to fix that with some super glue and some extra wraps. And then I wanted to get it lined up in the other axis as well, like left to right. So paint some super glue. You can see that super glue is kind of on its last legs there. It's getting a little thick and it takes a long time to dry. And that's probably going to cause me a little grief as we go along because I just didn't wait long enough to make sure it dried. But there we have it wrapped around, and hopefully that'll all act as one unit. And when wrapped around that bend, these eyes won't twist or turn very much. So I'm going to go to the start of the bend. There I'm showing you that fur. We'll get a little longer look at that. So I think we're making some kind of Santa Claus craft, and that was part of the hat. So here's a nice chunk of it. And there's that super glue grabbing onto a couple of stray fibers as we go. But I'm going to make a tail. I kind of wanted 1.5 to 2 times the length, the overall length here, but that tail may be a little long. It thins out in the back, so it's not a problem. I wrapped underneath the butts of that fur and worked my way forward, and then I'll pull it down and wrap back over it. It's a nice way to tighten everything up and still build up that underbody. If you try and wrap over the fur, it kind of squeezes and wraps around, twists around the hook as you work toward the eyes. So I don't know if that's a tip or something everybody does, but I thought I'd go ahead and mention it. So here we'll capture as much of that fuzz as we can and trim it out. So I kind of switched cameras. I went and I picked out the that fuzz is a lot like deer hair where there's kind of an under fur. It's long stapled. It's got a little shine to it. So I'm going to use it for the back half of the underbody. But I'm going to use the little shepherd's hook trick here where I fold this back over and then I'll twist the shepherd's hook and kind of make a nice um, essentially a loop, but it's dubbed the entire length of the loop, and when we twist it together it'll wrap it up nice and tight and capture all those long loose ends. So there we banged the camera with the bobbin as we tossed it over the top just to close that up. And here I'm twisting and we'll get some things out of the way. I was going to use the rotary feature, but I stopped because every time I go to use the hook, it goes to slip off. So I grabbed it with a pair of hackle pliers, and this is kind of a short section, so I'll just wrap in the conventional way. And I could have made that loop a little longer. I got at least or almost halfway. That's kind of what I wanted. But I made it a little tough on myself here when it comes to tying it down. So I get a couple of wraps over that. There's that little butt section. I can go ahead and tie that in. Nothing to trim. And we'll scuff up some of those long fibers and give that little halo effect there in the back half. So here's a little piece of that ecstasy yarn. And basically, I mentioned at the beginning, I'm kind of tying out of the scrap in. That was a piece left over from um, actual egg patterns that I was working on, but I can get about 2 wraps with it. I'm going to pull everything back as I go, and the 2 wraps will kind of make an egg-shaped, um, I don't know, inner body, if you will, here for this fly. Um, that inner body or that belly of either orange or this pink, light pink color seems to be pretty effective on some of these trout. So I'll get a couple of wraps, get that in place, and we'll trim that tiny little bit off, and that's probably it for tying out of the scrap bin. That little piece I cut out of there, I probably can't make anything else out of, but we'll see. All right, so there's what we're going for. And now, just like with other fur, um, you've seen other people do this, but I'm going to tie in, this is the belly side, right? Because it's a jig and it's probably going to ride uh, with this side down. So this is my belly side. So I'm going to put that in there and adjust it. But I'm tying the tips forward. And then I'm going to snip off the butt end. And eventually I'll fold that back over. So there's what we have so far. We're going to flip this over in the vise. And now this is the top side. So we're going to do the same thing, but I'm just going to do it with a longer chunk of this craft fur. So I'm getting a couple of wraps, and that's all the longer the craft fur was. So there wasn't a lot left over to pull up and help me snip this off. So I'm going to fight this a little bit. And I did leave some little butts on both the top and the bottom here. And I think they'll help keep this from just totally collapsing when it's pulled through the water, I should add. All right, so there we are, top and bottom. We have the white. I'm going to put in a couple of, actually it turns out to be about 6 strands of crystal flash. I'm going to kind of tie that in and fold it around so it ends up with a few strands on each side of the hook. Now, as I see it all magnified, that might be more than 6 strands. But it looked about right. So I'm going to pull those back a little bit. And one of the little tricks or secrets here, or it's probably no secret, is that I'm not wrapping in the same place. I was kind of working my way toward the back to capture those fibers and get them pointed in the right direction. So here I'm going to come in, I'm going to kind of snip these at different lengths so that it doesn't just look chopped off. And while we're here, we'll pull that top bundle of craft fur back over. And get it split about half and half on either side of the hook. Didn't have to work so hard there because you get to do it later, but I wanted to make sure that it was spread out on top. So I cut away for a minute because there was a crash in the other room and I had to go investigate. But we're all good and we're back here, and Same thing. I folded the what will end up being the belly side back and wrapped toward the hook or toward the back of the hook. You can see we have a little band there. And then the last little piece that I'm putting in, this is actually a piece of black wool. I'm not sure where I found this, but I've used it in a couple of places. Here I just want a few strands on top to kind of darken things up. I'm going to pull those butt sections back and wrap a few times so that they don't, if I cut them off and there was anything left over, it probably would have gotten in the way of that hook eye. Here I can leave them a little longer and they're well out of the way. So we'll fuss with everything and get it pulled back. And then one last thing I want to do just to tidy up around the front. And this step's probably unnecessary, but I want to put a little olive there. Some little minnows in my area have those olive green kind of heads. So I don't know. This is some kind of a mashup between an Alvin pattern where it's got that the orange or pink inside showing through, and then later in the season, those some of the minnows end up with darker heads on them. So here I fool around with some cross wraps just to kind of fill in. I'm going to end up taking it loose and adding some more dubbing. If I'm going to do it, I kind of want to make it look symmetric. So I'll do a few more crosses and kind of one the other way. And I'm going to back that off, and a little of the fuzz came with it. Let's twist that up and finish. All right, so I'm liking that. It's covered well enough. And the only thing is, at this point, I realize that white thread, if I do a band and whip finish right here, it would show up. I didn't have a dark green marker, so I'm going to settle for brown, change the color of the thread, and then put in my whip finish. So again, on some of those bigger, and if we do get some rain this fall, some of those rivers are going to be flowing pretty good. I want to be able to reach out there a little further than I might have otherwise with my Euro rig. So having a heavy streamer or something that'll sink seems to be worth having in the box. So this is the first time through. Like I said, I was tying from the scrap end. I'm not sure I'd do anything a whole lot different. It might look easier when I come back around and make one or two more to put in the box. So I took it out of the vise and off camera I gave it a little hairbrush work with a toothbrush and made it all go toward the back. Basically, there it is, dark on top, nice big eyes to look at. You can see through, see a little pink, and I think it's going to do just fine. So hope this helps you out. And if you want to learn more about me, look me up on Amazon. And until next time, be safe.